Good morning, everybody. How's everybody today? It's a new day, and my phone is purposely messing with me, and that's fine. That's fine. So, I was just laughing about, have you ever seen Team America? It was this brilliant movie put on by Matt and Trey Parker, the South Park guys, who have this uncanny brilliance to communicate things about the current moment in history that are just so absurd. You need to poke fun at them. And in that movie, there's there's two scenes talking about, okay, I'm going to be vulgar now because, you know, it's funny, when it came to Donald Trump, they said his vocabulary was low, or basically he appealed to idiots because he spoke to them on their level. And for the most part, that's actually true. Does that mean that Trump himself is simple or simplistic? No, it means that he was communicating with a very specific type of audience, not an elitist audience. And so I'm trying to communicate not with an elitist audience, even though I'm reading and trying to synthesize elitist ideas. So sometimes to do that, you got to be a little bit vulgar. And because that's where we're at as a society. Everybody's just a little bit vulgar. I don't know if you noticed. Everything is just a little bit vulgar. Everything is just a little bit Sodom and Gomorrah. So there's this scene in Team America where, so this is a PG warning. I'm going to probably use some colorful language because it's just like, it's the best way to, and I'm not going to do this justice, but there's this final scene where Gary gets on stage and he's talking about how Team America needs to go after the bad guys, and that you need to give them permission to go after the bad guys. And the way that he describes that to the audience, who's not, they just want everything to be cool, and they want to watch the show, and they don't want violence, and they want to believe everybody's a good guy and everything's cool, and they don't want to believe that, you know, Team America, which is this vulgar expression of Americanism, this idea that some ideas are more superior or more righteous than others. And so you need to sometimes you need to be the big kid on the block, and you have to take down the bully. But we live in a world where the bully has been completely inverted. Like, completely inverted. And I'll come back to that. I'm going to bring it back to the shooter that took down the healthcare CEO. Because that's what I'm talking about right now. But I had to bring up the Team America thing, because in the Team America speech that Gary gives to the audience, they're not receptive yet. But he has to explain to them why they have to go after the bad guys, why they have to deploy standard Americanism and this idea of, oh my gosh, American exceptionalism. Why American exceptionalism needs to be what is deployed. And he talks about this analogy of Dicks, Pussies, and Assholes. And he talks about the dicks being like, you know, a dick. If you were to think of a standard dickhead, you would think of a guy that's like kind of pompous and, you know, is the typical masculine embodiment where they only kind of seem to care about themselves, and they don't care about the pussies. But that's not true. They care too much about the pussies, and he makes the point that sometimes, you know, dicks just want to fuck everything. I'm so sorry for using this language. You know what? I don't even want to. I'm going to try to bring it back a little bit. Dicks want to screw everything, and pussies. Okay, so let's just say the masculine wants to control everything. The feminine wants everybody to get along. But what the feminine doesn't seem to realize is that for everyone to get along, that means that you have to invite the other thing to the table, the other body part that produces feces. And so if you see everyone as being the same, all of a sudden you have people who represent feces at the table, and then the people that just want to get along with everybody at the table, and they don't. So suddenly they start crowding out. It's 2-on-1, so they start crowding out the masculine. How is that a better way? Like I don't think there is a better way to explain the kind of current state of the world. That we have this idea that the feminine, which I will call Gaia, the feminine spirit, this idea of giving birth to something, but also this idea that we all should just get along, and we're all here in this place to get along, and that's the way we should see everything, which means you have to invite the feces makers to the table. But the masculine wants to get along with all the feminine, but sometimes it wants to get along with the feces makers as well, which, as Gary points out, are only 1.5 inches from the feminine, which is just it's so sick. It's so sick, but it's so accurate. Because, and then he says, sometimes the feminine can get feces so much into, this is vulgar, I know, I'm sorry, but it's making a point, a bizarre point. Sometimes the feces gets into the feminine, and then the feminine becomes like the feces itself, because it's only 1.5 inches from the feces. But sometimes the masculine wants to just take care of things in such a way that it dominates both the feminine and the feces, because it takes on both tasks. And sometimes you have to let it out when the feces becomes too prominent, that when Sodom and Gomorrah becomes too in control of everybody's minds, right? If your mind gets too invaded by ideas, sometimes the masculine has to step in and say, all right, it's time to put these people in line. And it sounds like a horrible thing, but it's not. And I'll tell you why. Because the masculine actually cares about the feminine and the feces. And a true masculine will realize that you don't need to dominate them all, but you need to set some things back in order, because it's the one that penetrates Gaia. And in this case, as vulgar as this is going to be, there was something that penetrated Gaia that restored order in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. I hope that's messy enough for you of an analogy. I hope I'm bringing it down enough that I wanted to do the whole bit. I wanted to say the words, because I was listening to it just before I did this and I was howling. It's so funny because it's so true. And I'm not saying I'm completely against violence. Just so we're clear. I am against violence. But who's not against violence? Okay, so now we go into... There was a couple videos that really caught my eye that I've watched over the last couple days that I have yet to put into a Substack, but I need to do it. And there's a couple clips that I would take out of them. One of them is the All In podcast, which are guys that are Silicon Valley guys that I have been following for probably 1.5 years. And they have this guy on who's like their science guy, and his name is Freeberg, I think. And close to in the last podcast, which I recommend you go watch, I'm not, do whatever you want, but I recommend you go watch it, because they bring up what just happened with this CEO of this healthcare company, a massive healthcare company that was gunned down outside of a conference in the streets of New York by a young man who is now under arrest. And we know an awful lot more about him. And to get to know an awful lot more about him, Kim Iverson just put out a video, which I highly recommend you go watch. Because she's almost, and I'm not saying anything about Kim or what she thinks or what she believes, but she's almost giddy about the fact that this guy's been taken down and that people on social media are applauding it. They're applauding the violence. They want the masculine to come in and take care of business. And they want it to do so in such a way that they don't care if it's all messy. Because that's the mob mentality. The mob is like, you get lowest common denominator, which is how most people think about things. And I'm not insulting anyone at all. I love everyone, and I'm just trying to get you guys to understand something that I'm seeing, and it's gonna, if you're not ready for it, it's gonna confuse you. So that's all I've been trying to do, is prepare people for something that I was not ready to understand, but then I kind of understood it, and now I'm just trying to share that with you. So So, I wanted to go, it's fine, I'm not that anyway. So, I only have a few minutes left. I'm going to try to wrap this up. So, watch the Kim Iverson video about the shooter. Understand that he is kind of a mixed bag of different ideas that are whirling and swirling and twirling out there in society about the way that things are, and perhaps the right way to right the ship, which is it perfectly embodies this combination of Elon Musk, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Donald Trump. They want a strong guy to come in there. They want a masculine to come in there and fix up the mess. And there seems to be this kind of embodiment of a spirit of revolution. It's a revolutionary spirit. Now, I could go into more of that right now, but I won't. And I will just encourage you to go read the Substack that I just wrote. And I know it's difficult to understand. I put a bunch of pages from a couple books I'm reading right now. One is called Light of the Mind, Light of the World by Spencer Clavin. And one was by Dr. Douglas Hagen that I've addressed a couple times, called The Singularity. Understanding the Singularity, the Cosmic Conspiracy. I know, it's a lot. But I put a bunch of pages in there, and I went over those pages with ChatGPT, and we discussed what is underlying all of these ideas. And it's evolutionism. A theory for which we have no real evidence. We have lots of evidence for adaptation. We also have lots of evidence that what we think is what the world is made of is not what it is. That gets confusing for people, scary even. And we're acting up. And as we're acting up, people are going to some really strange places. So watch the video about this young man that went a very strange place. Kim describes it very well. She's a little too giddy about it for my liking. Because none of this is funny. But I mean, like, if you don't laugh, you cry. And then there's the video from the All In podcast, which was their most recent. And they get into what happened to the CEO at the end of Freeberg, who's their science guy who believes in the material world, that everything is material, and that artificial intelligence is going to save us from everything. And that's where I'm really going with this. The intersection between artificial intelligence, aliens, evolutionism, and the current moment. Metaphysical, material, time. We are at a moment. And you, if you're listening to me, are most likely a human soul, spirit, that is not connected to this world in the ways that you might think. And I know that's confusing, but if you go read the Substack, hopefully it will make some more sense. I'm trying to tie together a bunch of different stuff for you. Magic and mysticism, and it's this wonderful looking book that looks suspiciously like a Bible, except with more pomp and circumstance and just funness to it. You know what I'm saying? So go check that out. I'm not saying read the book. I'm saying if you look at the book, if you've seen the advertisement, just let me know. They get closer to the end of the... What just happened? Oh, I hope I didn't lose you. Closer to the end of the podcast, they discuss what happened with the CEO, and they take a decidedly like, oh, you can't blame CEOs for the way that the world is. And they're absolutely right. He's absolutely right about that. So who or what can we blame for the way that the world is? Well, right now, the CEO that was shot down by this young man that is swimming in these ideas of evolutionism and righteousness and revolution, he believes that we are all the byproduct of evolution. Everybody believes it's everywhere. It's in everything. It's in every science, every technology, every proposition we're making. But it's fundamentally flawed. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And that's why it always goes off the rails. That's why it drives people to revolutionary moments. So on top of that, so look at the way that he's talking. Look at the way that he's talking about it. Take it from his perspective, which he's not wrong. And then also like the most recent Tim Dillon episode where he goes over it and he's talking about it like it's Christmas and it's wonderful and it's funny and he's reveling in it. He wants the chaos. Tim is a brilliant comic, but he loves the chaos, man. There's a lot of people that are welcoming the chaos, just so you know, because they're confused about what's going on. Okay. So I would suggest that you watch Kim Iverson's video about the shooter, learn something about him, what's driving him, what his motivations are, how we all collectively as society seem to feel that way at the same time, how Silicon Valley, by the All In podcast, and you can watch, there's a segment earlier in that where they talk about AI and the rise of AI, and that's going to be wonderful. It's going to blah, 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 blah. And I made some discoveries about AI, I believe, by putting together different kind of threads, philosophical threads, that make sense of it in a way that I don't know how else to do. Oh, come on, bro. Thank you. And so I put it there in that Substack. And the point is that we are at a moment. And in the Substack, I embedded a couple videos. I got up this morning and there's been this increasing push to, you've probably heard it, for disclosure. Tell us about the aliens. Tell us about what's going on. Did we reverse engineer the tech? Blah, blah, blah. Do we have non-human biologicals? Do we have retrievals from these crash sites? It's everywhere. Louis Elizondo put out a book called Imminent, which I immediately bought on the day it was released. I read it as quickly as I could. I tried to share some pages with you while I was doing so in my Substack. I'm trying to help people see what's going on, I think. And in the Substack that I just put out, There Are No Aliens Part 3, an idea I've touched on at least twice, hence Part 3. I'm telling you how I'm coming to these conclusions, how I'm coming to this, so that you might get some of the insights that I have been fortunate enough to have revealed to me. I don't know how else to make sense of that. I'm being perfectly honest. I don't know what to tell you what's going to happen. I don't know. I'm not trying to tell you anything other than there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and I just want you all to be as prepared as possible. So I'm trying to give you the tools to make sense of things in a way that none of these different actors are making sense of, in my humble opinion. I don't see anybody else doing it. So I feel compelled to speak out. Okay, I am going to have to wrap this up. Oh, shoot, let me do that. Okay. I'm going to have to wrap this up, but just know that I understand how crazy it looks. I understand how crazy the things that I'm saying are. I fully understand it. Trust me. I get it. But in the Substack that I put in, there's all of these sightings of orbs and UFOs and things that are looking suspiciously biblical, and or where the New Age movement meets the biblical narrative. And we're at that moment. And the whole thing, as I've written many, many times, is being perpetuated by the UN, the Lucis Trust, which is the metaphysical side of the UN, and other things. People engaging in magic with a K. This stuff it goes back at least 100 years. It goes back to theosophy. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I've written about it all. And I just want you to be prepared because they're going to try to pull some shit. There's some stuff going on, kids. And it's heating up. So this morning when I pulled up my YouTube feed, all of a sudden there's a couple videos there talking about these orbs and what is it? Oh my goodness, what is it? And I propose to you that whatever it is, it's a very old story. Meeting a very confused general public. And these are themes that have been discussed over and over again. If Hollywood does it, it's great. It's really entertaining. We like it. If I say it, it sounds completely bizarre and I sound like a crazy person. But there's literally nothing crazy about what I'm saying. Other than the fact that I'm saying it and it's actually happening. And I've been predicting it. So, you make sense of that. Okay. May God bless you and open your eyes and your ears so that you may see and hear what is happening in a way that lets you make sense of it, because otherwise you're going to be lost. And I think that's the intention. And I don't want you to be lost. I want you to be found. Okay. I love you guys. It's going to get weird. God bless.